What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. We help recruit today's go-to-market teams that will help build the next generation of unicorns. This podcast is also being sponsored by Allego. For all you sales leaders out there, have you ever absolutely nailed sales training or had a rep who killed a presentation that you wished you recorded to be seen later by new hires or other members of the team? Well, that's just one of the things that Allego can do. Not only does it allow you to record your best content for practice, collaboration, and feedback, but it gives you a way to organize all of your best content in one place so it's easily accessible to help improve sales performance for everyone. Email me, web@thejdavidgroup.com, so I can personally introduce you to someone who will take great care of you. Now, my guest today, I'm super excited to have him on. His name is Paul Fifield. He's the CEO and founder of Sales Impact Academy, which is the world's leading go-to-market learning platform. That means, at least the last I heard, have over 15,000 learners across the globe. It's also worth mentioning that prior to SIA, he grew 2 international tech businesses from 0 to 100 million in combined sales as a CRO. Those businesses are now collectively worth over $1.5 billion. Paul, welcome to Over Quota.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Let's just start with high-level Sales Impact Academy. And one other thing I should mention too, by the way, for all you listeners, is that Sales Impact Academy and the J. David Group have a strategic partnership. So for all of the go-to-market leaders that are out there, either my clients or future clients, when you hire a candidate through the J. David Group, Sales Impact Academy has agreed to offer their live courses, the live training, to people that you've hired through the J. David Group as a trial, if you will, before you expand into other areas. So if you're hiring BDRs, AEs, and people in management and leadership roles, there's something for you. So Paul, with that, tell us why you started SIA and what SIA is all about.
Yeah, sure. Very headline. We're building a learning platform, skills development platform, you could say, for revenue teams, right? So we're helping to provide essentially a continuous development solution, eventually for every role within go-to-market, but we're very, very focused on the revenue function. So as you mentioned, SDRs, AEs, CS, and management. That's our key focus.
Mm-hmm. And tell me why. What was the why behind why you even began?
Sure. My background is I'm 2-time CRO, built as you said in your intro, built 2 tech companies. Very successful on paper. Looked like it was a dreamy experience, but actually it was pretty pretty hard because, very honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. And basically, and I didn't realize that at the time. Back then, back in when I was, having my 2 runs as CRO, it was like 2012 to maybe like 2018, or maybe like 10 to 18. There was very little out there in terms of like, the kind of like communities that now kind of exist. I just thought, I was just very on my own. I thought it was just me. But now I understand, sort of like taking a sort of step out of the industry and sort of looking back in, that there's this giant problem that exists, which is nobody really knows what they're doing, right? And that everybody has been working, making it up as they go along. And then I think as the last decade kind of like went on, communities kind of sprouted up, and we sort of like joined up, and it's like, oh, you're finding it really, really hard as well. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, and I guess the fundamental, and now I understand this, right? The fundamental issue is that this is probably one of the most important global professions, and it has absolutely no structured learning or infrastructure, I guess, around it to help with professional development, right? And that is insane. And I kind of like, joke. Imagine if you take a profession like the legal profession, right? And you just did away with law school. It's like, who needs that, right? That's a rubbish idea. And you take away anything related to like formal structured learning or education in law. And the way that it works is you left school, left university, got a job, and was like, right, I'm here to practice law. Let's go. And you learn by the person sitting next to you who's doing law as well, or YouTube or blog posts or random books that people say are really good about law. Mm-hmm. And you just make it up as you go along. Now, if that's how the legal profession worked, the legal profession would be in total chaos, right? And same. Imagine if that happened with medicine. Right? Would you like to go and be treated on by a doctor who got professionally trained in that way? Probably not. Not professionally trained in any way? Probably not. So it's kind of insane that this has happened, right? And we are where we are. And so that's the core problem I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to bring in, the core thesis here, right? And it's got to be true because it works for other professions. Is that if you provide people with really high quality, structured, education and learning, they can master a craft, they can acquire the skills and be successful. And that's what we're trying to do at scale.
That analogy fits all kinds of industries. So not even just the I'll call it white collar industries like lawyers and doctors, but also even across the trades. You can imagine, somebody who's a crafts person or somebody who is an architect or whatever. If they didn't have the additional structural learning and training over, a period of time, then that industry would be in shambles too as well. So the way you illustrate that is just makes it so clear. And it's amazing that, it hasn't been done in a good way, in a scalable way up until this point. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you were learning, right, when you mentioned just sort of learning on your own and putting it all together and figure it out, what was the feedback loop for you? You're the CRO, you're reporting presumably to the CEO, which means that you probably don't have all of the right feedback that you need in order to execute and do your job effectively. Like, what was your feedback loop to know that you were either didn't have all the answers, were you struggling? Because oftentimes it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? And your head's down and you're just sort of going about it. So what did that look like?
Oh, it's horrible. There is no feedback loop. Like, who am I getting feedback from? Like, the CEO doesn't know. Like, no one. There's no. I'm in my own little echo chamber. And you make a very good point. And again, I remember this feeling, and it was just so horrible. It's basically, I don't know what I don't know. I don't even know the full breadth of knowledge that I need to have to be a great CRO. Could someone just tell me that? Like, tell me where to go. And then it doesn't exist. And this is the thing. And then you've got this crazy situation where, revenue leaders are overwhelmed. There's just too much to do. Every day you've got a massive to-do list and you're triaging that every day. And you're like, what am I not going to get to yet again today? So you literally have no time. But the problem is trying to piece together all the random fragments of knowledge and information spread across the internet, across books, across events and workshops and all these random things. Like, you haven't got time. But it's so time consuming to try and even work out where the information is. It's another slap around the face, right? Or like a punch in the gut. And it's just horrendous. One of the things that I was really, I love about what we've built is we've got a course. I don't want to be too self-serving about talking about it, but we have a course called the Definitive Guide to Revenue Leadership. And it's a 24-hour course. Mark Roberge, who's one of our investors, teaches on that course. Alyssa Fink teaches on that course, and she's the CMO at Tableau. Pete and Mandy run it, both exceptional revenue leaders in their own right. It's our only executive course, and it runs for 24 hours long, right? And it runs over 2 6-week periods. But it is literally everything you need to know to be a world-class, revenue leader at a fast growth B2B tech company. It doesn't even need to be SaaS really. And it's just brilliant. Like, there you go. That it finally exists, right? You can, and people rave about that course. So yeah.
That's amazing. So presumably how you got your learning is exactly what you're alluding to, right? You went to events, you listened to podcasts and blogs and all that. When you were hired as a CRO, you obviously came to it with something, of course, right? What were you, why did they hire you? What skills did you already come with knowing, or what success had you had prior to that to sort of at least get that opportunity and then ultimately figure it out?
Well, I guess the interesting thing for me is that my route in was a bit kind of a funny one, because I co-founded a company and just took that role. So I didn't, and I haven't really talked about this much with people. I haven't really thought about it much myself, but I didn't come through the, like, I was an AE, then I was a manager, and then I was like a VP, and then then an SVP, and then a CRO. Right. I started as a CRO knowing really nothing, right? Because I co-founded this company in New York, and we raised a bunch of money from Greycroft. That company is called Seros. Right. Now it's doing very well, 350 people. It's just a very, very successful company, very, very high level of ARR. And so I was in the deep end trying to work out what to do. And then I acquired knowledge there. And then when I went into my next gig, when I came back from New York and came back to England, I knew now the basics of how to build a scalable, predictable, data-driven revenue function. And not many people in England knew that, right? In 2014, it was still quite a new thing. And I found this company. It was in the student space, and I actually, they weren't even hiring for anyone. There was only 8 people in the company, but I knew that the business model was amazing. And I'm like, wow, if I could just build this, SDR function, which creates the pipeline, which feeds the AEs, which feeds the customer success or like account management team. That's a really simple model. I get it now. I can build that. And I just went and pitched it to this guy and said, like, I can transform your company. Your business model is amazing. I can transform it. And he took a bet on me. And then I took that business from 2 million in revenue to 40 in 3 years. And built like a 120 person team because I knew how to do it. Right. That said, I knew how to do some of it. I was still struggling because I still didn't know. I still didn't have the complete knowledge. Right. So even that phase was really, really hard. But look what I did. I had some knowledge. I then applied that knowledge to a new company, and then it absolutely exploded. It was probably one of the fastest growing companies in Europe at one stage.
Man, I have so many questions about that, but I want to ask a question before we get too far away from SIA, which is the course that you just mentioned, the definitive guide to revenue leadership. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
How and other courses? How are the courses? How do you curate the the instructors, and then how are the courses created? Is it instructor created? Like, in other words, Mark sit down and create the course? Do you have structural designer within SIA? Tell me how that works.
Yeah, sure. So we've gone through the phases pretty quickly as a business. We started off trying to help as many people as I possibly could at scale, and so we opted for a live teaching method. Initially we were just kind of like creating. There wasn't like a massive science behind it. We just knew that we needed to create some stuff to help SDRs do their job and AEs and then managers. And then this sort of next phase that we're now in, which is like, right, really focusing around those like 4 personas, right? So SDRs, AEs, CS, and then that step up to management. And there's a couple of like career path journeys that are really tough for companies and individuals. It's SDR, month 0, don't know what an SDR job really is, need to learn everything from scratch, right through to maybe like a 15-month time frame where they then transition to becoming an AE, and then they're an AE for a couple of years. That 3-year period of development is actually really hard. It's really hard for companies to get right. Companies are trying to like reinvent the wheel, create all this like, enablement materials to do skill development internally. And it's just hard. and they're not skilled. Companies are not natural educators, and so they struggle. There's another one, which is the SDR going into SDR team lead and suddenly becoming a manager at like 26. That's hard, really, really hard. The AE becoming a team lead, that's a hard one as well, right? Early management within any role in go-to-market, hard, already really hard. How many people actually get support, like in terms of like proper, learning and development before they become a manager? Probably close to zero, right? And that's the thing about our industry. It's sink or swim. It's just sink or swim every which way you look, and it is just not fair on the individual. It's not good for the company. So now we're thinking very, very, thoughtfully about, okay, let's now start thinking about this using the learning, the curriculum the courses that we're creating, and really thinking about the skills that you need at the different stages of your journey in role. And what's now starting to happen is that people are using us as an augmentation to their career pathway. So to go from like SDR1 to SDR2, take these 2 courses, get 75% in the exam, and that plus hit your metrics. Now you're ready to move up and take that promotion, get that promotion, and starting to standardize how some of these career paths actually happen, right? Because again, career pathing is actually a big pain point for companies. It's a difficult thing to get right, and most people in revenue just default to hit your number, which isn't, it's less than ideal.
Right.
By using like a platform like SIA to like ensure that people have got the right skills as they go through those steps, before that step up to management, take these 3 management development courses, so that as a leader of the company or a CRO, when people make that step up, they've got the foundational knowledge, right, to be successful in the role they're about to step into. I mean, that just makes sense, right? And it doesn't make sense the way it works today. It's kind of insane.
So who's curate? How are you curate? I know Mark obviously is from Stage 2 Capital, but how are you getting the instructors, and are they committing a certain amount of time to each course? How does that work?
Yes. So we have a whole network of amazing like leaders in all these different disciplines within go-to-market, right? So we've got like a head of like curriculum, if you like, and we've got all of these advisors, like some of the best people in the industry, and together we are starting to create these standards, like, but also like we also know internally, in the company what we need to do. Like an SDR needs to be great at cold calling, right? So we have a cold calling course, right? There's cold email, there's using LinkedIn, there's using social for selling, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? Building sequences, and we have all, curriculum for all of that. But yeah, we're working with people like, Sam Nelson, for example, over at Outreach, and a few other people I can't actually name in public yet. But we're kind of starting to like set these standards of what the skills are that are required, and then we create the curriculum with the very best people in the industry, and we co-create that. But we have subject matter experts working across every aspect of the curriculum, basically.
Got it. I want to get into a couple of your growth stories and ask you about how you're planning to grow Sales Impact Academy. But let me just go back to something you just said a minute ago, which is 75% of a score, I guess, if you will. I'm assuming that's to a certification. Is that what it is? In other words, when somebody goes through a course, they receive a certification. I think I heard you say somewhere in the past that your certifications are actually getting tougher now. Tell me a little bit about that. So if I'm a go-to-market leader and I'm purchasing, a course, I'm sending one of my employees through SIA, what are they getting to confirm for me that they actually learned what they should learn?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at a very basic level, we have exams in the platform. So you can see like, has someone passed the exam, right? So that's one way of seeing, in a very binary way, has someone acquired this knowledge. And if they fail the exam, they have to retake it, and there's a whole new set of questions, and there's a whole new exam and all that kind of stuff. obviously we're in the revenue org. It's a very metrics driven environment. So, we're seeing amazing improvements in, meetings booked at the top of the funnel, conversion rates through the funnel. We've seen like 20-30% more meetings booked per month. We've seen one customer saw a conversion rate go from 20% from sales qualified opportunity to close one to 30%, right? It was a massive increase because the AEs became more effective and better because we taught them these amazing universal best practices from the best people in the world, right? So there's a dimension which is much better performance, higher revenue. So that's great. Clearly it's working. There's I can see that they've acquired this knowledge. I can see in the platform they've consumed this learning, and they've scored on this exam. And like I say, now it's being tied into the career pathing as well. It's another incentive for people to make sure that they actually do this and are successful.
I want to get back to the growth a little bit. You mentioned growing from $2 million to $40 million and $2 million to $40 million in I want to say a 3 to 4 year period of time. I was reading somewhere, it may have been your LinkedIn profile, where at one point you hired something like 50 people in the span of 4 months somewhere. Tell me about that. I'm always curious about the mechanics of scale, right? People talk about scale and rapidly growing. What does that actually mean strategically for you? And you can even, I'm wondering, as you look to grow Sales Impact Academy, how much of what you've learned in the past is informing what you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, loads. You're always learning, right? And I'm learning every minute of every day. It's kind of one of the joys of being in a fast growth company is that everything just gets condensed into a very short amount of time, and it's not it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. And it's pretty unhelpful when the market just goes completely mad, like it's done. I'd say that's deeply unhelpful. Yeah, I mean, so I guess is the question, what are some of the things to think about as you scale?
Yeah. So looking back, let's just say at the past growth that you've had, right? And we can even specifically talk about growing from 0 people to 50 people and 50 people to 100 people and going from 2 million to 1 million. How do you instrument the business in a way to be able to handle that capacity? I know I've heard you say in the past where sometimes businesses grow too slowly, other businesses grow too fast, and you need to be growing at the right pace. What is that? How do you make sure that you're growing at the right pace from an infrastructure perspective? Like what technology you need, what people need? How do you think about those types of things?
I mean, this could be an entire book, and an entire course, probably multiple courses.
Yes.
Some of the big things to think about. One of the most important things to really get right is your operations function, because your operations function is where you get your data. And to scale in the right way and know that you're at the right pace, you need excellent reporting and you need excellent data, and the quality of that data needs to be very, very high. So there's two key measures of which kind of give you a sense of like, are you going too fast? Are you going too slow? One is your, and it's all about leading indicators. So in one bucket, you've got your leading indicators of unit economics. Now, what that means in plain English is like, how much pipeline are you creating? Are you creating enough pipeline to feed your team, right? Whether the A's are creating pipeline or not, whatever model you've got, like you need an X amount of pipeline on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, right? The other one is your leading indicators of customer success. Now, the problem with SaaS is that you don't know that you're fundamentally successful with a customer until 12 months after you've signed them, right? When you're asking them to like renew and for another 12 months. Right. Now, that's a long time to wait to know if you've got it right. So, and this is all out of the school of like, Stage 2 Capital and really Mark Roberge. But the leading indicator of customer success is finding those success metrics that give you a pretty decent indication that this customer won't churn in 12 months. Now, I think Slack had 2,000 messages sent in the first 60 days. At one point in HubSpot's history, it was like using 5 of the 20 products within 60 days. For us, it's actually a consumption metric that we're tracking of like consumed X amount of learning in the first 60 days. You know, and we've tied that then to, and we've looked at the data and we're like, okay, well, if we tie that to our retention like metric, if they do this amount of consumption in the first 60 days, with you know, they won't churn, you know, pretty much won't churn, you know, 12 months later, 10 months later, whatever. Mm-hmm. So instrumenting yourself well like that gives you everything you kind of need to know to keep going fast, right? And if these cohorts on the leading indicators of customer success keep, like, you know, 80% of them, you know, from 2 months back have gone green, they've hit that metric, keep going. We haven't got a problem with the acquisition of customers. Are we creating enough pipeline on this side? Yes, keep going, keep hiring, keep going, keep hiring, keep going, keep hiring. If one of those starts going a little bit awry, pause. I mean, this is in an ideal world. Pause, fix, and then keep going. Now that is how you instrument. What a lot of companies do, I think one of your questions was how do like Series B and Series C companies, like, they're like, you know, why is there not more success, you know, even for later stage companies? And one of the big things that people do is they're not instrumenting their business like this. And they'll go and hire 20 reps. They'll raise a bunch of money, go and hire 20, 30, 40 reps. There'll be a spreadsheet somewhere that says, you know, every rep makes us $1 million a year. We have 40 reps, we'll get 40 million. Let's go. And yeah, that can be an absolute disaster. And if that team is now acquiring a bunch of crap, you're baking up a massive churn and NDR problem 12 months ahead, and then you could be in some choppy waters. So that's how you instrument it. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that you've got to think about in terms of like codifying your culture and making sure that you're programmatizing that culture and reinforcing that culture at all times. You got to get your communications architecture really nailed. What is the pace and the rhythm of the business? What are those comms touch points? How do you stay close to your team, even in a remote environment? And then it's just, have you got the senior team that can cope? And that's a big one. That's a really, really, really big one. Because the senior team that got you to $1 million, from 0 to $1 million, best will in the world is unlikely. Or the senior team that maybe even got you to like maybe 3, 4, 5 million probably isn't the senior team that's going to get you from 5 to 50, or like even 5 to 10. So that you need some pretty serious people to come into the business, as you know, if you hit that inflection point and you're on the road to like tens of millions, 50 and then 100 plus.
I want to follow up on what you just said there about the senior people, but I have another question I want to go back to before I forget it, which is operations function. You mentioned that is the foundation, if you will. It seems to me like the first thing that you said in terms of you know, scale. When you say operations function, give me an example. Like, what do you mean? Do you mean, and you mentioned data. Immediately I'm thinking, okay, CRM. But what do you tell me more about that?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, RevOps, right? So, how just the operational infrastructure and support that you have for your go-to-market team, and obviously that includes things like your tech stack, your data. You know, you're going to be wanting feedback and data coming out of your product, and how do you instrument all of that? How do you take all these different data sources and create like clarity, live dashboards through stuff like Tableau, piping data through things like Snowflake? Like, how do you, like, that is so important. And I'm not saying that we've got it absolutely nailed ourselves. Mm-hmm. We've got a ways to go, but it is absolutely critical that you get that entire the strategy right around it, the right tech stack, that people are using things in the right way, that your processes and your buyer journeys worked out properly and well, your sales stages, and you know what's going on, and you're not flying blind. Yeah.
You mentioned senior leadership team from 0 to 10 or 10 to 100 million, whatever it might be. But let's say, for instance, you are starting, well, no, let's just talk about SIA specifically, I guess. When you co-founded Sales Impact Academy, where was RevOps in the priority for hiring on your senior leadership team?
Well, I can go back even further. When there was 4 of us in the company, and the 5th hire was a part-time RevOps person.
Wow. Okay. So that early. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise you're going to get yourself into a complete mess.
Is that person in conjunction then with sales and marketing leaders, or where are they kind of?
We didn't really have any. There's 4 of us in the company. So like,
right. But that's what I mean. But you were the ultimately you were the sales leader.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I was founder-led selling, but and we had no money, so we had to get someone in part-time. But I'm rubbish with operations, so like I need so we needed to get someone in. Yes. But here's the thing: if you don't get some coverage there, you get yourself into a complete mess. And then what happens is you eventually hire someone in, and the first 6 months is then tidying up the mess and just going, what the hell's going on? And it's painful. It's painful. And it could be terminal to the company. In the most extreme cases, if you have no idea what's going on and your data's in a complete mess, it's pretty awful.
If you're, let's say, for instance, a tech founder, right? In other words, you're an engineer by trade or a developer by trade, and you don't have the same skill set that you have, right? Sales leadership, go-to-market leadership, that type of thing. What's the priority there in terms of, do you bring in someone who is a strong go-to-market leader and then bring on RevOps? Do you bring them simultaneously if possible? Do you bring on RevOps first? And like, what is that? I mean, again, obviously, assuming it's founder-led sales to begin with, right? They've done something to generate revenue to get it to $1 million or whatever it might be. But as they're starting to think about building out their team, tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the big mistakes that people make is they, if they're not from maybe a sales background or don't have confidence in doing it, is they think they can just outsource it to someone else. And when I say outsource to someone else, I mean like hire someone to do it. But the problem is, in those super early stages, you can't do that. You're the one that these early stage customers want to talk to, because who are you? You're this random little company with a big idea, with a passion to solve a problem. So what are they actually buying? They're not really buying much of a product, right? Because you haven't got much of a product because you're early stage. But so they're going to be buying vision. In fact, they're going to be buying the same thing that your early stage VC will buy into, which is like the vision for what the problem that you're trying to sell. Now, would you as a founder like hire someone to go and do your fundraise to get your pre-seed round done? Well, that sounds ridiculous. It's as ridiculous to do the same thing as you're pitching to early customers, right? And so it's important that you're out there and you're hearing it and you're seeing the reaction and everything else, and you if you're really solving a problem, you'll get some traction. But it's so important for the founder or the founding team to do those early sales. It's so important. And there's another nuance to this as well, which is you have to also be getting the right signals from the market. This is a bad signal. Early stage VC makes a bunch of intros to their mates. You get introed to a bunch of people from your net via your mates. It's all mates, warm intros, and you get some revenue and you get some customers. Now, that might be great, but it could be a bit of a misleading signal, because you've got these warm introductions where you want to really like know if you're really getting some product market fit, or even like idea market fit, right? Is getting in front of people that there's a way you have no connection, right? It's a cold start. And if someone from a cold start who's busy and get them to spend time with you, believe in you, and sign up to something, doesn't have to be much revenue, but just something. That's key. Do that 8, 9, 10 times. Okay, and you got some revenue, a couple of $100,000 maybe dollars in ARR. Now you're ready. Now you can start thinking about building a bit of a team, but you're still not ready for a revenue leader, right? Now you're gonna be thinking about, right, maybe get an SDR in. He now can create some pipeline for me, and maybe I can get a fractional SDR manager to like help to manage that person. Use something like an SIA to develop that person. Then I'm now getting some pipeline coming through. Like there'll be a point in time where it's like, okay, now it's sensible to maybe get another SDR, or maybe you start with 2, because actually it's probably a good thing to do. So it's not, always, two is better than 1, and then 2 AEs. But then don't step back yet. Don't step back yet. Like those AEs, you're in the deals, like they're giving you leverage. And then once you'll know the time, when the time is right, that you can step back. But it'll be 18 months, 2 years before you can truly step back from that front line. And then once you're getting to $1 million, then that's your time. That's your time when you can raise your A. That's when you can bring in your VP of sales, and then you're off.
That is fantastic. I love that. Thank you for walking us through that. That's great. So you mentioned that it's unlikely that you'll have a senior team that can get you from infancy to adolescence, if you will, and then adolescent to adult, right? And that most likely it's going to turn over. My question is why? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen in skills gaps, I guess, right, or other things that are preventing folks from going from infancy to exit, I guess, if you will?
Being growing at scale is really, really hard. Like it's really, really, really hard. Brutal, in fact. Yeah, it can be. And it can overwhelm people very, very, very quickly. And I think where wheels start to fall off is that, if you have an inexperienced leader who suddenly needs to build a team in multiple countries of very high caliber people, that's when like the gap is too great. Like, put it another way, if you're growing anything north of like maybe probably 200% a year, it is not a place to learn. It is not a place to learn how to be a C-level exec. It just isn't. And a lot of damage can get done in that period when you don't really know you don't know that damage is being done, but trust me, it will be. And then what happens is you then start to bring in the seasoned professionals that have done the scaling to like 5 to 10 to 20 to 50 to 100, and they're like, wow, this is all wrong. The structure is wrong. The profile of people is wrong. Like, it's understandable, right? Because the person that built that initial function had no idea what they're doing. Really, they were kind of really didn't, probably, in many cases. And like I say, you're moving too fast to then like go, oh, it's okay, we'll have a learning plan and we'll be fine. We'll get there. It'll be okay. You haven't got time for that in rapid growth. If you're growing at a slower pace, then absolutely, of course you can learn. But it's just in very, very rapid pace. I mean, we grew 500% in our second year, from like 1 to 5 million, and it was great. But I can tell you, it's like, that's not a place to learn.
500% where? You're talking about SIA or the SIA? Tell me about that a little bit. What has the growth trajectory been, and then what are your growth goals over the next 18 to 36 months?
we have a fairly slightly arbitrary target of building a platform to support the ongoing skills development of 1 million learners by 2028. That's our kind of like big, hairy, audacious goal. There's a lot of stressed people out there that need help. We know that we can fix that with a continuous skills development approach, which is what we do. And that's the big thing, is that, the old way of solving this problem was this point in time, vastly expensive Marriott hotel 2-day, training extravaganza. Doesn't really work. And it's so flawed in many ways from a learning design perspective. And it's flawed because simply a point in time solution is not what we need, right? We need continuous learning and development. Because we're hiring through the year, but also, I haven't got time to spend 2 days in a Marriott with no windows. But I have got half an hour, 2 hour, or an hour every other day to do some learning with most elite people in the industry. That's a good way to learn. So that's the target that we have, and I think that we want to help as many people as we possibly can. We see it more in terms of the number of people we can reach than we do in terms of revenue. But if we have 1 million learners on our platform, then this will probably be a $10 billion public company. So,
and I imagine that when you think of it in terms of 1 million learners by 2028, you're then, I'm guessing, reverse engineering that number and saying, okay, well, first of all, this is how many learners we have now. This is what the infrastructure of the business looks now in terms of the instruments of the business. You mentioned RevOps and those types of things. And you're saying, okay, in order to get to that point, then, these are the KPIs or the LPIs that we're going to be looking at. Therefore, we're going to have to hire this many people. Right? That's pretty much how you're thinking about that from as you're building your business and thinking about what you need in order to get there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk to me about a couple more things here. Is it possible for the person that you just mentioned that doesn't have the senior level executive skill set in a 200% growth company? How does that person, right, upskill? Right? How does that person, the next time they're looking for a leadership role, be in a position and have the confidence where they can say that, yes, I can handle this, and then a CEO or somebody on the board saying, yep, hire that person. We think they can do it. Even though they may not have been there before, because, you know what I mean? Like, I hear that a lot just simply from mid-market AEs to enterprise AEs, or an enterprise AE who wants to be in management. You're like, we haven't been here yet. So how does that work? How do you fill that skills gap?
Well, I do believe that fundamentally, I mean, obviously it's the core thesis of what we do, is that you can do that with high quality education, which is what we're doing. The point more that I'm making is that I think even that breaks slightly if you're in a 4, 5, 6, 700% annual growth business, and there aren't that many companies that get to that kind of velocity. I'm just saying, to be an exec in one of those companies, you just need you need experience. Actually, you really do need some experience, as well as the knowledge of and the skills to do the job itself. That's all. So yeah, I mean, go. There's various routes. Learning your craft in a slow growth environment. Great. Yeah, absolutely. Where you're not hiring, a dozen people a quarter or more. Where you can pace it a bit more, learn as you go, use something like Sales Impact Academy to give you the knowledge, apply that, learn, gain the experience. That's probably it. I guess the point I'm making is rapid growth is not really where you learn.
Got it. Sales or SIA Foundation. Tell me about that. I saw a post that you put on LinkedIn that I was fascinated with. So tell me a little about that.
Yeah. When we set the business up, we set up the foundation, or we put it in our sort of articles of association and sort of founding documentation, I've always long admired, when I first read Behind the Cloud, Mark Benioff book. I think it came out around about 2010-ish. And I just loved this weaving in doing good with business or philanthropy, if you like, into the founding DNA of a company. And so Sales Impact Academy was my chance to do that, right? To replicate that model. They have a 1-1-1 model, so 1% equity, 1% time, 1% profit goes to the foundation. And so we decided to double that. So we're doing a 2-2-2 model. So 2% of our equity, 2% time, 2% future profits will go to the foundation. And what it's set up to do is, we will be launching next year, a single access, like single user access. Right now, the only way to get into Sales Impact Academy is if the company that you work for takes a team subscription, right? We want to now give access to anyone who's got, credit card or wants to use their education stipend from within their company. I don't know what the pricing point will be, but let's call it $100 a month. But $100 a month is still, for many people, even in America, even in the UK, certainly in the developing world, is also a bit of a barrier. And so the foundation is set up to basically give access to people who are unemployed, on very, very, very low paid jobs, economically disadvantaged. We want to try and improve diversity in all its forms in the industry as well. Really, really helping people in effectively low sort of socioeconomic groups, and just uplift them, because we can, through, again, it's just going back to like education, right? I want this to be accessible to accessible to anyone that wants a career in sales and go-to-market. And so that's what the foundation's being set up to do. And we're starting very slowly, but the ambition is that one day, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if 10,000 people a year, get free scholarships, learn how to become an SDR, how to become a CS rep, how to go into operations if they're not comfortable being in front of customers, and then get an entry, the entry level salaries for these jobs, right? I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could take someone who was, had no hope, had no job, or had a low paid job and was struggling to put food on the table for their family, and you put them through a program through the foundation, and they can walk in and get an $80,000-$90,000 OTE job as an SDR. That's life changing, right? And that's simply what we want to do. And if we can pull that off, not just in America and the UK, but eventually globally, then that'd be amazing. I can lie on my deathbed and think, I sort of I made an impact and helped a lot of people. I guess leaving someone, what's that whole thing when you sort of like you're leaving the place better than when you arrived, or whatever, that kind of thinking.
Impact is in the company name. So you talked about it being in the founding articles, right? But the word literally is in the name, impact, which is phenomenal. I love that mission. I've been sort of championing the idea of, frankly, lessening or reducing the emphasis on degrees of higher education, because it prevents so many people from moving up socioeconomically. Because if they start off that way and they don't have access to capital to, frankly, even take an SAT course, or maybe they're in the wrong zip code, so their education in and of itself isn't that good, which means you can't afford an SAT course, and maybe they can apply to maybe one college, but they can't apply to multiple colleges because they can't afford the application process. And there's just so many structural barriers that keep people out of the way, especially people out of opportunity, especially if they're from underrepresented and underserved communities.
Yeah. How many job requirements do you see that require a 4-year degree?
I think people just do it blindly without even thinking about it. Like it's on every job. It's on every job description.
See, that's wrong. I mean, that's crazy. And here, I wrote a piece on Crunchbase recently about this. Like, isn't that wild that the very education system that's let down sales and go to market, right, is now like somehow now complicit in this weird thing where companies, it's like a sort of like a sick joke for the individual. It's like, well, hang on a minute, like, great, I've now got to get myself into 100 grand of debt, learning some random shit I'm never going to like use,
Right.
and just to get a job in go to market and sales, like that's just a sick joke.
It is. It's amazing. I'm laughing because it's like, this, to your point, this industry who has unstructured way of learning, as we talked about, and trying to train people and figure it out, is now asking people to come through a structured way of learning to get to a place where it's like, now we're not going to teach you or a structured way anymore, and you kind of have to figure it out on your own. It's just and you need a bachelor's degree in whatever it's in science, or it's just crazy. So
Yeah.
and I'll say that, so I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I want to be able to put them in a position for any opportunity that they can dream of, right? Because why not, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, go to a 4-year college, get a degree, and then go do something. As I'm thinking about just their education and just the way that the whole system, I think, is broken anyhow, it's like they have places like Sales Impact Academy and other ways that you can learn a particular, I'll call it even white collar skills that will put you in a better position over a period of time economically, because you're not spending $100, $150, $200,000 going into debt, maybe coming out. It's a static document anyways, the degree. I got a degree in communication, but none of the way that we're communicating right now even existed back in 1997, right? So it's like, we had to figure it all out, new ways of communicating, right? And so I think that, what you're doing just with SIA, and then also the SIA Foundation, is just so critical to all of those things. So that's just fantastic.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're on a big old mission. It's not easy creating a new category, but we're here for the long haul.
One day at a time. Well, you're ready to jump into the final 5 questions.
Let's do it.
I ask you 5 questions. I won't ask any follow-up questions, just because it's supposed to be sort of a lightning round, but we'll see if I can keep that discipline. So the first question is, do you have a philosophy or general approach to how you prioritize your time?
Yes, I do a natural triaging, and yes, it could be better.
Okay. Tell me about a setback and how you overcame it.
I've had like so many setbacks. I think it's difficult to choose one, because I'm spoiled for choice. But what I would say is every major setback has often been like an inflection point to something better. So just keep going, just keep pushing through, is all I can say.
How do you manage stress or prevent it from overcoming you?
All the normal ways. Well, I'll tell you what, one of the biggest ways is not drinking alcohol. I think that's one of the biggest impacts on stress, actually. Mainly, and if you're in a very high stress job, you start to maybe use it as a bit of a tool to like de-stress, almost like an anesthetic, and that's a bit of a slippery slope. But it's more, for me, is if you just have too much on a Friday or a Saturday, you ruin the next day, and all of that natural subconscious processing is screwed, and then that just makes you super anxious. Well, it does me anyway. So I just stopped, and everything in life is better when you don't drink. Not to say that I don't have fun drinking, because it is good fun. There's no question about that. But one of the biggest ways that avoid stress is zero alcohol and good food, like healthy food.
What do you want to get better at right now, besides time management?
Probably, yeah. I was going to say, can I time management probably. Yeah. I need to do some improving around that probably.
What are you most excited about right now, both personally and professionally?
Well, probably my imminent move to the US is I'm very excited about potentially living in LA and working in a time in the right time zone. As we talked about earlier on, I'm based in London right now, but work in the East Coast time zone. So it's 4:30 at the moment, and in the UK where I am, it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9:30 p.m. So I'm excited about that move. And look, I'm absolutely buzzing about what I'm doing. I'm just so excited about the impact that we can have on so many people, and I feel very blessed, feel very lucky, feel very grateful. I've landed here in a very circuitous route, and random and everything else. But I'm here, and I feel like this is my calling, and to know that is pretty huge, and to know what we're building is having impact is fantastic, and very excited about the impact we're going to have over the next decade.
I guess this will be the sixth question, which is how can people reach out to you to say thank you, ask any follow-up questions that maybe I didn't ask, or maybe even enroll their team or enroll themselves in Sales Impact Academy course?
Well, if you've got this far, congratulations. I mean, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, like Paul Fifield, Sales Impact Academy. You'll find me just searching on LinkedIn. My email is paul@salesimpactacademy.io. Web address is salesimpact.io. So any of those routes, you can find me.
Paul Fifield, thank you for going over it.
Jay Webb, my pleasure.
I'm cueing the music, everybody. Goodbye.